Consumer confidence taking its biggest monthly dive since 2021. Inflation is still eating away at real wages, and homeownership slipping further out of reach for young buyers. He argues that it's time to get back to the basics, the economy, American dream, and reining in Washington's reckless spending. We'll also get to tariffs and the House budget resolution package. So let's dive into all of this with Ted Thatcher, president of Bright Lake Wealth Management. Ted, good to have you back. Good to see you. So consumer confidence took a nosedive. What's the real reason behind this drop? What needs to happen to turn it around?
I think it's a great question. Essentially, we did have the biggest drop since 2021 on the consumer confidence. And I think ultimately it does come down to what Americans are seeing. We just saw this inflation number, 3% year over year tick up. And I do think that when it comes to normal everyday folks, they're trying to get access to housing. And we still see the 30-year mortgage today. If we're going to get a new mortgage, 6 to 7% is what we're seeing. And so that just has created this big squeeze. And people are saying, what is next? What can we expect?
Yeah, I mean, young Americans, especially young Americans, they feel shut out of the housing market. And the 6 to 7% mortgage rates, that's not helping. Is there a realistic path to making homeownership and the American dream, attainable to more people again?
I think so. And ultimately, I think it just comes back to those 2 points, which is how do we manage inflation to bring that down where people feel like that American dream that I can work hard and earn a durable wage that's going to further my life, like that can actually happen. And so I think the first step is to actually get more and more strategic with the government efficiency initiative that's already been taken. We've seen so many headlines around Doge and, everything that's been, exposed even from there. But it's almost like but this issue that seems to have started as a nonpartisan issue become really partisan. And so I think that the more we can actually get spending down, the less the market's going to continue to assume we're going to have this out of control inflation, which has really actually also been hugely consequential in terms of the housing market. We've seen the Fed lower rates, but long-term rates on mortgages haven't come down. And that's because the bond market's assuming it's really inflationary. But again, the more we can cut spending, the more that will come down too.
Okay, so I know you've been really critical of President Trump's tariff-heavy talk. He plans to lift the pause on the 25% tariffs on Mexico and Canada next week. Are these trade policies helping or hurting everyday Americans?
I think that when it gets painted with too broad of a brush, that's where the issue comes up. I think a lot of people could say, why don't we be a little bit strategic with the tariffs we're going to look at for China or even products from Mexico? But when we see these, I would say, again, broad brush statements like, hey, we're going to tariff the Canadians 25% on goods, it seems like we're using a mallet instead of a strategic scalpel. And I think that again, it has tended to be a really partisan sort of rhetoric. And if we can back that up a little bit and get back to the types of things that J.D. Vance has talked about, for example, like these kitchen table, normal, average, everyday American issues about durable income, bringing down inflation and housing accessibility, that's where the real focus should be from the Trump administration right now.
Right. I mean, the kitchen table issues are what got Trump elected, the issues that hit Americans in the face personally every day. So, but about these tariffs, aren't Trump's tariffs part of the solution here? Like a negotiating tool to put America first, force other countries to pay fair, bring jobs back home. That's part of a kitchen table issue, protect industries that have been gutted by cheap foreign labor. I mean, obviously, sure, there's concern about rising costs in the short term, but a strong economy starts with strong production, and that means making things in America again.
I think everybody wants a strong economy. I think that ultimately, and like I said, it's more of a strategic way to apply these than with such broad strokes. I think sometimes the administration has gotten a reputation for, kind of using, I'll say, sweeping remarks as a negotiation tactic. And so one of the reasons that I think the consumer confidence number has come down a little bit is because Americans are trying to figure that out. How much of that's actually going to be applied in a strategic way, or is it going to be too broad of a brush? Of course, we all want strong jobs here in the United States. We want to, see the recreation of a lot of those, manufacturing jobs even brought back onshore, and ultimately that's good for America. But if the I'll say rhetoric is too painted with too broad of a brush, it just can, I think, leave people with too many questions. Then it might be worth if I could say it that way.
Yeah, I get it. Okay, so more of a surgeon's scalpel instead of a meat cleaver to the issue. That's another perspective. We like to look at all the perspectives here. Okay, so let's get to the House. They're set to vote on a budget resolution that could pave the way for President Trump's reconciliation agenda. One big, beautiful bill is what he likes to call it. It includes extending the 2017 Trump tax cuts, funding for border security, possibly raising the debt ceiling by $4 trillion. What do you think of this budget plan?
I think that first, what I love about it is that it actually does get to one of those key points we were just talking about, which is, I'll say, durable wages. When I think that it's very, very good for the economy when more Americans have more of their own money to go and transact with. That creates commerce. It creates, productivity for the country. And so to see the extension of those tax cuts, I think helps normal people feel like they do have a little bit of access to that American dream that they can keep earning, and it's not just going away from them. That said, what I don't like about it is that over the 10-year time of the bill's proposal, we're actually seeing an increase in the deficit. And so ideally, we'd be able to get a budget passed that is able to sort of maintain at least or lower that deficit, because I believe that maintaining and lowering the deficit is actually going to be the key to bringing down long-term rates to make that housing market we were talking about before more accessible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and what this could do to the deficit really just depends on the success of the proposed spending cuts as well. So it's more nuanced. But Ted Thatcher, president of Bright Lake Wealth Management, thank you for your time today as always. Appreciate it.